I have good news and I have bad news for you. And it's the same thing. Nobody's really thinking about you that much. It's just people move on. Even your own mom probably isn't getting up every day thinking about you.
Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. And guys, we have our sights on someone special today.
Only a mother could invest in this idea.
Made this like super artistic.
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually.
True startup story, guys. You got it. Your company just got seed round financed. Congratulations. You're going to the moon. But now you have to scale. You found great talent out in California, New York, Georgia, and even Eastern Europe. So what communications platform will you be using to ensure your international team is always aligned? Well, the answer is easy. Slack.com for Teams. We've used Slack for all of our previous startups, and they've supported us in tremendous ways. And we want to give them a thanks today for supporting vchunting.com. Did you also know that Slack is a great tool for personal use? Yeah, I use my own personal Slack channel to drop in documents, notes, to-dos, and follow-ups to ensure that my workflow throughout the day is right on course. I promise you, if you try out slack.com for personal use, you'll end up using it for your team as well. Go to slack.com to check it out. Welcome everybody to season 2 of VC Hunting with me, your host, Peter Saddington. I am super excited today to have another DFJ alumni. We've had Bill Bryant, Ravi Balani, and Tim Draper. Now we have Heidi Roizen, partner at Threshold Ventures, board director in many different companies, Stanford lecturer, mom, and avid dog lover. Heidi Roizen, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we here at VC Hunting, we have lots of entrepreneurs and founders and venture capitalists who watch us, and they want to know and understand the untold stories of venture capitalists. So we're going to go back because we do a lot of digging here. And before we start out with you getting into venture capital, I have a question. Tell me about the popular, this made national headlines, by the way.
Yes.
Tell me about the popular campus board game that you made with Tim Draper called Stanford the Game.
Stanford the Game. Oh my gosh. Well, that is ancient history. Most people even during my tenure at DFJ didn't know that there was actually a company a million years ago called Draper Roizen Productions.
Ooh.
And Tim and I were undergrad classmates, and one day we were having lunch after we graduated, and we were talking about how getting your degree was a matter of checking all the boxes, that you did this distribution, you did that distribution. I said, it's like a game. It's like we should make a game out of it. And Tim said, let's do that. And so out of that was born Stanford the Game, a board game that was all about going through Stanford. And Tim and I created that and sold it for a couple seasons. And we kept all the inventory in his parents' garage. So every time I'd see his parents, they'd say, when are you getting that stuff out of our garage? And anyway, we had a wonderful couple years with that product. It was a hobby. It wasn't, our full-time jobs. And then we decided to move on to other things.
So, I mean, something like this, a legacy artifact, a legacy idea might be worth a comeback, Could be worth
you never know. I mean, there have subsequently been a lot of games based on campuses. So, we started something.
So that's awesome. So you started off with TeaMaker, the first spreadsheet program from 1983, 1996, and you entered venture capital in 1999. Give us a little bit of a story and history. What brought you into venture capital in 1999, and what is keeping you here?
Well, I mean, as you just pointed out, most of my life I've been more on the entrepreneurial side. Had my own company with my brother, had Stanford the Game before that. I was always an entrepreneur. And in fact, I jokingly still refer to myself as a recovering entrepreneur, because I think once you have the entrepreneurial spirit, it never leaves you, right? This is always what you want to do. That said, what happened is, I sold my company. I worked for Apple for a year as head of developer relations, and then decided the corporate life wasn't for me either. And retired, so to speak, from the corporate world, and thought what I would do is become a mentor capitalist. So I would take my time and my energies and I would devote it to startups, but no longer as the CEO, no longer as the quarterback, but more as the coach. And after a couple of years doing that, it was really interesting times. I was on a number of interesting companies, including Great Plains, which was the first $1 billion acquisition by Microsoft. I ended up getting recruited into venture. It was just one of those interesting moments where, it was 1999 and there were a lot of new venture formations happening. And one of them heard about me and called me up, and I joined venture capital as a partner at that time.
And one of the things that rose up in my gut as I was doing research, Heidi, was joining venture capital in 1999. That's an auspicious time. I mean,
it is.
So yes, I mean, like looking back in retrospect, one could say that the timing probably was ill-conceived.
Oh, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. I mean, the funny thing is I joke about it. I joined in May of 99 was my beginning as a venture capitalist. So I had probably the worst timing ever because, you came into a market that was super crazy.
Yeah.
I did 6 deals in my first year. 2 of the 6 went public within the year of my doing them. There were 10x valuations, and I thought, hey, this venture stuff is really easy.
Yeah.
And then the dot-com crash happened. And then, it was drama and trauma, and it was really, workouts and trying to help these companies stay afloat, or triaging, or coming to a graceful ending if that was what needed to be. And I spent a number of years, as did most people in the industry, doing some pretty unpleasant work, some pretty unhappy work. And that was, I suppose that was, I'll chalk it up to a great learning experience. Eventually those times ended and eventually I left that firm. I ended up joining DFJ and now am with Threshold, the spin out of the venture group. And that's why perhaps I'm cautious about certain things I see, because I feel like, my partners know that one of my favorite lines is, I've been to this movie before. So there are times I see things and I think, oh, I've seen this before and I don't like how it ends.
Yeah. I know how this ends, guys.
Yeah.
I already know the
Yeah.
end. And so being a prolific blogger, being a prolific communicator, one of the things that I didn't find, and this is a novel to me, is you haven't written a whole lot about your experiences in the pre-dot-com crash, the post-dot-com crash. And I wondered why. Because and I love the way that you said this, mentor capitalist, you've written a lot about women's issues, you've written a lot of coaching ideas, helping startups and entrepreneurs. But there was interesting, kind of void as I did research. I was like, wow, there's got to be so many lessons that you could have extracted from this dot-com bubble burst. And then is it
I have actually written somewhat about it. I mean, first of all, I didn't decide to start writing a blog post until I think it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So it really just wasn't something I did until one day I thought, I've got some things to say, so let me start. And I started a blog post. And I did write some things. I actually went all the way back to my Teamaker days and wrote some things about learning about company culture and learning about how to negotiate.
That's right.
How to deal with the press. And so there are some, it's out there. It's on, it's on Tumblr. You can find it. If you go to HeidiRoizen.com and click on blogs, I think you can get to it. But then what I decided to do, I wasn't super consistent. I wrote when I had something to say, and, I found sometimes I didn't, a lot of my work is done one-on-one or one-on small teams with the firms in which we have investments. And so, about, 6-7 months ago, I thought, well, I really do, I get a lot of questions, especially from my Stanford students. And I decided to start this kind of, it's tongue-in-cheek, but not really, called
I like it.
Heidi.
Yeah, Help Me Heidi.
And decided to take all of my learnings from my extremely long career and answer questions. And so I have been, when I write those, I am drawing on, 20 years as a venture capitalist and 20 years as an entrepreneur before that. So it's all there. I just don't, I feel like what's important is what is useful and prescriptive to people today.
Fair enough.
Not necessarily what is historically, I'm not writing history lessons. I'm trying to give advice for people who are in it today, as I am, right? I'm still doing this every day. So
For
that's
sure.
my focus.
Speaking of Tumblr blogs, so again, we at VC Hunting, we hunt for the stories. Back in 2015 on a blog on Tumblr, I love this, and I'd love for you to tell the story to our audience here today. On 2015, a blog on Tumblr, you said, "What I learned negotiating with Steve Jobs."
Ah, yes.
I love this story so much. I'll give you a little bit of context here from some of the notes. You had Randy Adams and William Parkhurst, who worked with Steve Jobs at Next, and they had introduced you, and he had a problem, I think, that he felt like you could solve in terms of word processing. And so tell us, how did that experience go, and what did you learn?
Well, I mean, it was super interesting. One of the really wonderful things about my career is I was able to work with Steve and with Bill Gates and the people of my generation who really were the leaders of our industry, and I'm very thankful for that. They both Bill and Steve, amazing individuals. Really, I'm so sorry for Steve's loss. I mean, he was really a national treasure. I mean, he
For
really,
sure.
talk about people who have made a huge impact on the world, and Steve is one of those people. As has been reported, he also was not one of the easiest people to work with, and I think sometimes your best lessons are working with challenging people.
Well, he was asking you for 50% when you were only ready.
Yeah, no, he it was very interesting. I mean, and so I decided to write a blog post about it, just from the perspective of when you are working with someone who is, really on top of their game, what can you learn? What is your side of it? And again, I haven't read that blog post in, I wrote it 5 years ago, so I haven't read it myself in a while. But as I recall, one of the things I talked about is just, I knew my business backwards and forwards. I knew my numbers backwards.
You said know the numbers.
I knew what I could afford and what I couldn't afford. And I also knew what I tried to understand by talking to other people at Next. What were his objectives? What was important to him?
Right.
And I knew, in a way, this deal, in fact, he said it to me one time. It was kind of funny. He said, I make more money on interest in the bank than I make on my deal with you.
You did write that.
That's because he had a lot. Ross Perot had put, I don't remember, 60 million in. At the time, it was a humongous financing. Now it sounds like, every day. It sounds like Tuesday, right? But at the time, he joked with me that, he made more money on interest than he made on my deal. So I recognized that just that particular business negotiation was ultimately more important to me and my company than it was to him and his company. And so I tried to figure out what was important to him and tried to frame it in a way that would be acceptable to him. And it ended up working out well. It ended up working out well for both of us, frankly. I ended up paying him millions of dollars. So I think at the time, he was pretty happy with the whole thing too.
Well, from what I understand, reading his autobiography, he liked to win. So as long as you helped him feel like he was the winning participant in this negotiation, then you were probably in the right position.
Well, and that is, that brings up something I wrote in one of my blog posts, maybe more recently, about the art of negotiation. Really is about finding the maximal intersection of mutual need, and the idea that if you tell me what you want, you're only using your data set of what you know about how to solve your own problem. If you tell me about what problem you're trying to solve, you're allowing me to bring my mind and my connections and my resources and my knowledge to solving your problem. And I may have an even better solution than you have, but it'll never be on earth if you don't tell me what problem you're trying to solve. Right. So I am really a big believer in this idea that negotiation is the art of finding the maximal intersection of mutual need, right? That is what you're trying to do in a negotiation. And I also believe, we live in a world that is very relationship oriented, not transaction oriented. I mean, today there is almost no pure isolated transaction. I mean, even when you take a Lyft or an Uber, you grade them and they grade you, right? So you are your reputation today more than ever before. And so I really do believe that if you approach all interactions as relationships as opposed to transactions, this whole idea of how do we both benefit from what we're trying to accomplish here as maximally as possible, is just going to make you a better citizen of, fellow traveler in this world, in this economy, in this society that we live in.
Absolutely. And I love that. I love that you're highlighting this. And that was actually number five on your recent post on your first round article.
You did your homework.
Yeah. Well, we're the VC hunters, so I got lots of notes.
I feel hunted.
You are hunted. The 8 rare gems on building a fulfilling life and career. That was number 5. The art of negotiation is finding the optimal intersection of mutual need. Let's pivot to this article because you had 8 gems. I'd love to talk about all of them, but I can't, and we don't have time for them. But there are 3 that I really would love for you to unpack for our audience. In your article, the 8 rare gems for building a fulfilling life and career, such juicy goodness there. Number 1, you said not doing something hard. If you're not doing something hard, wasting time. That's great. But number 2 is really powerful. I'd love for you to unpack this a little bit. You said your ethics set the tone for life. Unpack that a little bit for us. What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, it means that you just, your principles and your ethics, what you choose to live by, whatever that is. I don't believe people have one set that applies to work and one set that applies to family and one set that applies to relationships. I believe that we are who we are across the board. And so, for example, I don't understand how someone could, lie, cheat, and steal at their work and yet say, oh, but at home I'm the perfect,
right,
spouse and whatever. And so to me, it just means that the way I prosecute my life is my work, my home life, my position as a friend or a mother or a sibling or whatever it is. I bring the same me to all of those things. I am not different. And I don't know, for me, that is one of the reasons why I can sleep at night. And I think it also has dictated who I work with and what kinds of companies I want to be involved with and what kind of people I want to be involved with, because I like to be true to my own values and I don't want to have to park them because something I've signed up for example, in work would be a compromise to those
right
values.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, just for me, it works pretty well.
Well, I think it's fantastic advice. I think especially in today's world of social, authenticity is one of those rare, if I'm going to use the word again, rare gems, because it's easy to compartmentalize. I'm this way on Instagram, I'm this way on Twitter, I'm this way at work. But I think that authenticity as a whole through all of your life, whether it's work, home, social, whatever, I think is really important because it's easy to get compartmentalized with the applications that we have today. And
and you bring up something really important too, because it is, and you will see this, I'm not a big social media user. One of the reasons is because I think it's really easy to get misunderstood. It's really easy for social media to be very polarizing. And I am not comfortable with the idea that someone would know me by a soundbite. Right. I don't feel that I think we are in very difficult territory for a lot of people, that judgment is passed on, on a sentence. And so
that's right.
And decisions I've made, right, is I might tweet about my dog. I think my last tweet was about my dogs. So there's that. That's really, and that might be controversial. I don't know. But my rescue babies. But I am not one out there pontificating on religion or politics or somebody. I don't tend to talk a lot about other people because I don't feel that that's my place. And I think that in this era, you get misunderstood a lot.
Absolutely. And actually, one of the things that I've loved about doing this segment, VC Hunting, and it allows venture capitalists to come on and answer some of these questions and tell a fuller story.
Did you know that there's even more value than just audio or video? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at VC Hunting, and make sure to sign up for the VC Hunting newsletter, where you'll be able to get weekly news on venture capital, startups, founder stories, and the occasional wisdom extracted from Peter's brain. Go to vchunting.com to sign up. And now back to the episode.
Let's move on. I love this one because I'm a big believer in what the Egyptians called your second brain or your gut. Number 3 on the eight rare gems, you said your gut has more information than you do. Expound on that. Where has your gut enabled you, Heidi, to make the best decisions?
Well, I mean, I think, and this harkens back to something we said in the very beginning where I jokingly say I've seen this movie before. And, you know, people say, oh, venture capital is their pattern recognizers. But there is some value in recognizing patterns. Now, there is also some danger in seeing patterns where there are no patterns. And of course, you know, the world evolves and things change, but some things stay the same. And you know, one of the things I also believe is most of the issues you face in starting and growing a startup are human issues, not technology issues. And you know, humans haven't changed very much in the last couple millennia, as best as I can tell. And so to me, those are the things that I've spent, you know, now I'm 61, so I've spent 61 years dealing with other people, and they don't change. And you learn about, you know, I think you learn to have more empathy, and you learn to understand that understanding people's motivation is really important. Understanding what kind of decisions they're going to make and what kind of directions they're going to go in. And so to me, over time, you do enough of this, and it does, I think, result in gut feel. I think, you know, the book Blink sort of talks about this as well, right? You do something enough, and you develop what feels like a gut feel, but in a way, it is informed by these volumes of history you have had being in these situations and having your, you know, it becomes a part of your decision-making process. It almost becomes subconscious. You say, oh, I don't, you know, someone might just say one wrong word and you sort of go, oh, I don't know. I know what in the past when people have used those sorts of turns of phrases, they are not as trustworthy or something like that. So I do feel, you know, and it's funny, I almost can't give you an example because I think that it's such an integrative part of my decision making that I can't say, oh, the data told me to do this, but my gut said do that, right? It is all part of what we do. And I think early stage investing is very much a combination of, yes, there are data and there are analytics and there are things you can do and there are references you can check. But one of the reasons, and actually I wrote about this pretty recently on Help Me Heidi, one of the reasons why in normal times, in order to raise money, the VC and the entrepreneur need to spend time together is because you have to decide, can I be in a relationship with this person for the next 5 to 7 years where I am not the one calling the shots. I am not the decision maker. I am going to hand them, my partnership, our firm is going to hand them $10 million, and they're going to spend the next 5 to 7 years deploying that plus whatever else they raise. And we're not calling those shots. And so developing that relationship and that understanding and seeing if someone says they're going to do something, do they really do it? If they say they're going to get back to you, do they really do? If they say they're going to hit a certain number, are they going to hit it, or are they going to know why they didn't? I don't know how to build relationship other than with the passage of time and interactions. And so that to me is, and again, that ends up informing, you might call it gut, but it's data. It's just a different kind of data.
Absolutely, 100%. I loved, especially Heidi, your quote around not technology, but humans. It harkens me back to one of my favorite systems thinkers, Jerry Weinberg, who said in his book in 1986, The Secrets to Consulting, that he's never found a technological issue. Every issue is a human one. Yeah. And so you certainly resonate there. The last question that I want to ask from this from this article, 8 Rare Gems, I just loved this idea because we have a lot of millennial Generation Z founders and operators, or wannabe founders and operators, that watch our show internationally, and they're on the come up. And so I want you to talk about number 8, the 20, I'm closer to 40 now than anything else, but the 20, 40, 60 rule. And I'll give you some context.
Yes.
The millennial and the Generation Z those generations they're lambasted by visual stimuli, peer pressure, pressure to be something maybe that they're not, and especially in venture capital and startups, there's so much money, which I think can confuse and blur the lines of reality. And so tell our audience out there, number 8, what is the 20-40-60 rule?
Well, I love this rule, and I've quoted it so often that it actually originated with the actress Shirley MacLaine. But I've quoted it so often that if you Google this, I think sometimes I come up ahead of her in the search results.
That SEO.
Shirley, if you're listening, I'm sorry. It's yours. I give you credit. But the 20-40-60 rule is as follows. At 20, you're constantly worrying about what other people think of you. At 40, you decide, I'm not going to care what other people think of me. And at 60, you come to realize no one was actually thinking.
I love it.
And I love that. And it is very, in a way, what I say to people is, and the reason I talk about that rule is because it's very empowering, right? I have good news and I have bad news for you. And it's the same thing. Nobody is really thinking about you that much. It's just people move on. Even your own mom probably isn't getting up every day thinking about you. Your own your boss. I would say my boss doesn't get up every day and think, I wonder if Heidi's fulfilled in her job. I wonder if she's making enough money. It just, people don't care about you. And so on the one hand, that means you really need to look out for yourself. On the other hand, that also means stop taking it all so seriously. Stop taking, and I think this is where, my own advice to I don't know, I'll say millennials because I live with a couple of millennials. My daughter and her boyfriend live at my house. And so I get to talk to millennials all the time. And I say to her, and I'm happy about this, that like, why do you put things on social media? Think about what the point of social media is. And I'm very proud that both of my children, actually my children and their significant others, they're not particularly active on social media, right? They're not out there because I think when you start trying to build that life, excuse me, as people call it, this is my Facebook life, and isn't this brand, and isn't this whatever and whatever. You're also building a not very true version of yourself, and one that again is open to being attacked or misinterpreted. Whatever. But the flip side is people move on very quickly. There is always somebody else to go look at, and nobody really cares that much. So the flip side is, I think we spend way too much time worrying about what we say, worrying about what others say, worrying about what do people think, and the truth is people are not thinking about you all that much. And so if you can just get over it and move on, you can use your brain cycles on much more productive things than being in what I call endless spin cycle, ruminating about something you said or someone else said.
Absolutely.
Now, that said, every time, I believe when you make an error, you have to think, how did this happen? What can I do to correct it? What can I do to make things right with the other people that, that were impacted by this? And how do I make sure it doesn't happen again? But once you go through that thought process, you need to let it go and move on. Absolutely. And just endlessly thinking about, you're an idiot. That negative self-talk that people have in their heads, trying to tame that monster again, it's good for your work life. It's good for your life.
I love it. I think in terms of the social apparatus and the social systems of today, they really are castles made of sand. It's just, it's trying to build up something that could be taken away or destroyed, or especially in this world of technology and applications, we don't even know if these technologies are going to survive the next decade. They could be gone.
Well, and also we are just connected all the time. We are always connected. We're always responsive. And I know this is an issue that I hear, my daughter's generation talk about as well. And I do think it takes some discipline to disconnect and to have quiet time and to have, put all the devices away for an hour. There's a good chance the world is not going to need you for that hour. I'm a really big believer in meditation. I meditate 40 minutes a day religiously because I think learning to quiet your mind, learning to find that place of inner peace is really, really, really important. And so it pains me to see people who are so connected they cannot be still for 10 minutes. And
Absolutely.
I know that practice, which I only adopted maybe 4 years ago, has really changed my life. And so I'm a big proponent of whatever it is, meditation or listening to music or going out in nature or doing something where you can just get back to that quiet inner self for a little while every day.
Absolutely.
Is really important.
Absolutely. I completely agree with the whole idea of unplugging. And it's interesting. I just finished for the second time Jason Fried's book, It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. One of his chapters, he talked about don't be in FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. He said, be in JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. He said, you don't have to be knowing everything all the time. And so
I'm actually about to write a blog post at some point in the next month about how to say no. Because I do believe that one of the most important things you can learn is how to protect your own resources, your own time being the number one resource. And yet people have such a problem saying no.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have a couple
upcoming.
Well, you can use the words JOMO, the joy of.
I do. I love JOMO.
I love JOMO too. Couple more questions. Well, talking about the 20, 40, 60-year-old, people aren't really thinking about you, but let's be intellectually honest, Heidi. You have been hailed as a powerful and influential leader in the venture capital space. In September 2008, you were awarded the Annual Achievement Award from the Forum of Women Entrepreneurs and Executives and Women in Tech. And especially in 2013, you had the Women in Tech Fame, Hall of Fame. In 2018, you were awarded the Financial Woman of the Year and many, many more. However, in 2015, you also wrote a Tumblr blog that says it's different for girls. Now, I'm not going to hash up the past and all the negative stuff of the past. You can go to Heidi Roizen's Wikipedia page to learn all about that. But the question I wanted to ask, and this is something that was on my heart because I have a young boy and a young daughter, and I want them to grow up in a world of entrepreneurship and venture capital. I hope they're entrepreneurs like their dad. But as she grows up, I want her to have access to the same opportunities. And my question is simply this. With all the tough experiences that you've had, being a woman venture capitalist, being a woman founder, operator, entrepreneur, what have you seen has changed since the 90s and the early 2000s? And what do you think yet still needs to be done for women in tech?
So I think that in some ways, it's so much better now because the blatant, overt issues that if you talk to women of my generation, you will find that probably, so many of those women will tell you they were propositioned in order to get their business and they were there. I mean, the kinds of blatant stuff that
I've read your blogs.
Yes. Those things. When I talk about those things with women of my generation, everyone's got a story, right? And I think that blatant type of stuff, now the repercussions are understood. There are methods if you're in a corporation, those are things that are not tolerated in most corporations. I think public shaming has been used. Again, that's a slippery slope too. I'm not a big on the one hand, I'm not a big fan of it. On the other hand, I think that sometimes when that is the only avenue, and it has proved in some cases to open things up and be effective and
the dialogue,
find when one person has a complaint, it turns out there's a pattern of behavior and other people come forward. And so I will say that while I think there are also negative components of social media with respect to this, there's a balance, there's positive and negative. I think that the thing we still have to overcome, and in a way it's much more insidious, is almost the subconscious issues with respect to any sort of discrimination, any sort of, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's ageism, this idea that because you are different from me, you are not as good and you don't have as much to offer. I really believe in diversity. I think nature shows us that diverse organisms are stronger.
Yep.
I certainly, I've never been on a board that didn't have a woman because I'm a woman. And so, but I've certainly been on boards where I've been the first woman. I've been in companies where, I've been in board meetings where or meetings where I'm the only woman, been in meetings where there are multiple women. So just taking gender as one lens, I think that diverse groups work better, and I have seen evidence of that. And so I do think that we have to catch not only the blatant stuff's easy, right? No one should be a predator, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But, there are subtle things about being passed over for promotion because of this, and, again, Sheryl Sandberg has talked about this forever,
Right.
about, being perceived as bossy or being perceived as forward or whatever, where if a man had those same attributes. And I mean, I think you've done a lot of research. I feel like Jack Bauer, you've read my files, so you know about me.
Yes, I know how the story ends.
But, I am the sort of poster child for this with the Heidi Howard study, where they took a case about me and they changed the gender, and people found Howard more likable than Heidi. And it's exactly the same Harvard case. It's just changing the gender. And now that test was done 20 years ago, but some of it has been repeated recently, and the results are kind of the same. So anyway, I just think that we all need to be more aware, all of us, myself included, that you come in, again, your informed gut, because of all your interactions since you were a baby and dealing with society and dealing with your family and whatever, you will have biases. You will. And catching them and seeing them and correcting them is on all of us to do. And unfortunately, because they are so subtle, sometimes you don't even realize when you're doing it.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for us to continue to have this in the public discourse, because it elevates the opportunities for us to self-check, gut check, be self-aware, be situationally aware of how we interact with others. I think it's a good thing. It's not like we're trying to self-police ourselves. I think that might be going too far, but I think it's important for us to have these conversations continuously and not assume that it's fixed is kind of the idea that came up in my mind.
Yeah, well, and I think that this is, again, I think it is very powerful and very mind expanding to, I have a t-shirt that says, "Don't believe everything you think." And I think that it's a really important idea that, just because I think it isn't necessarily true. And I have to question even my own thoughts around things, because my own history and biases and whatever are going to lead me down paths that may not be the best paths forward. And so I do try to challenge myself. And again, I think it's one of the joys of being in the venture capital industry. When you work with a great team of people like the team that we have at Threshold, we challenge each other, because that's the only way we're going to make great decisions.
I love it.
And we're trying to invest at the, bleeding edge of where the world is going. And it's controversial. It's not, there's not perfect data. And so, having those different opinions and being able to be open to what other people think, it helps us, I believe, make better decisions as venture capitalists.
I love it. And Heidi, you've been such a great example for many decades for women and the underserved and minorities. So I do want to thank you for that. Here's our final question. I wonder if you can harken back and remember this and we're going to Twitter here. On April 25th, 2017, you said, quote, "Late for a board meeting. Reason, too much wild turkey."
Yeah.
And so for those out there that might be thinking it has to do with alcohol, probably not. So tell us about that story. What happened?
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I live in a pretty rural area, and I was actually on a board call, and I heard this giant crash, and a wild turkey had flown through my front window.
And
then was running around inside my house and went and hid somewhere. And eventually my daughter was here and she chased it out with a broom. But the turkey was fine, by the way. Turkey was not injured. But I caught it on my Nest Cam. I have a Nest Cam outside. It's the front of my house, and this turkey just came blasting through the front of my house, broke this giant window. So that was unusual. We actually won like one of those free Nest cameras for submitting. They have like funniest videos of the year, and they have an animal category. So hey. we got the animal category.
I love it. And obviously you guys, during post-processing, you're going to be able to see the wild turkey flying through the glass here
Yeah, it's
somewhere.
pretty funny.
It's a pretty awesome. Well, Heidi Roizen, thanks so much for this opportunity to speak with you and talk about your experiences in venture capital. I'm going to give you the last word. Where can people find more about you, Threshold Ventures, and your story?
Oh, well, that's sweet of you. And thank you so much. It's been a real delight, a lot of fun. Well, threshold.vc, if you're an early stage entrepreneur, please go there and check us out. And help me, Heidi. Well, if you just go to HeidiRoizen.com, you can go to Help Me Heidi. Help Me Heidi's on Medium. So I got my blog on Tumblr and this on Medium because I don't know, why not? And I'm happy to hear from people.
Awesome. Well, everyone out there, we're going to have all those show notes below. So make sure that you check them out. If you're a young entrepreneur, founder, operator, and you're looking for some money, no promises here, but maybe Heidi can help you out. Heidi, thanks so much again for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
True startup story time. Guys, as a founder, I'm often asked, what are my go-to tools and technology that I use as I begin a startup? Well, that's easy. One of them is Dropbox. Dropbox is the easiest way to ensure that all your files and documents are synced on all devices, whether it be mobile, your local desktop, or remote. We want to thank Dropbox for supporting vchunting.com, and make sure to get your 30-day trial free at dropbox.com/business. What can I say, guys? A wonderful, wonderful lady, a wonderful human being, and a fantastic example of a venture capitalist, founder, and entrepreneur. Heidi Roizen has been in this game, and as you guys know, we do extensive notes on everyone that we interview. I did a little bit more research on Heidi, and obviously I did a ton. Here's Tim Draper as well. But I end up doing a lot of research on individuals like Heidi Roizen and Tim Drapers and your Ravi Balanis and Bill Bryants. And the reason is because they've been in the game for so long. And one of the things that I loved about this conversation with Heidi is her willingness to talk about the experiences of the past and the unfair treatment. But I don't want to focus there. One of the things that I really loved is her willingness to talk about her experiences with Steve Jobs and what she learned from that. Having that experience, I think, is worth bringing up. You know, it's not often you get to talk to someone who was sat in the negotiation room, sat right across from the man, the legend, Steve Jobs, and had him try to, I guess he kind of fleeced her with the 50. She was asking for 15% of the contract deal, and he said, I need 50. And so it's just great to be able to have those types of stories come out of someone, a luminary, like Heidi. I do want to reiterate some of the rare gems of building a fulfilling life and career. I just loved the fact that she's able to tell these stories. When it comes to your ethics set the tone for life, I love the fact that she's a principled woman, a value-based woman. She makes decisions based on values and principles and allows her to say no to things. I think in today's world, it's so easy to get caught up in the opportunity, right? The opportunity costs. And sometimes, and I've been here as well, and I don't mind admitting it, is sometimes when it comes to being a founder and entrepreneur, it's easy, certainly it's easy, to give up or forego your principles and values because you need the money, you need the opportunity. And so it's great to hear from Heidi that she said that, hey, living a life of ethics, your ethics set the tone for your life, is really a great reminder. Don't compromise on your ethics. Don't compromise on your principles and your values. I'm also a big fan of your gut. You guys have heard me talk about that before on this channel. And I just love the fact that she's willing to say, hey, you know what? Your gut has a lot of data. It might not be quantifiable or qualifiable maybe even, but there's a lot there. There's historicity, there's experience, there's stuff that you can pull from. And so it's important to be able to pull from that, especially as you're moving forward in life and growing towards your 20, 40, 60. I really, and this was kind of a little bit self-serving, but the question around the 20, 40, 60 rule, I just absolutely had to bring up because it's a stark reminder. No one's thinking about you. No one cares about you. And it might sound negative, but it's actually, as Heidi said, it's actually quite liberating. It's quite freeing because it allows you to live an authentic life. It allows you to do you and not worry about what others are thinking. And frankly, one of the most profitable ways to live in the world is to look at what everyone else is doing and do you. Do the opposite. Because what everyone else is doing, generally, the masses, it's not that profitable. And so the 20-40-60 rule, remember, no one's thinking about you. No one's caring about you. And another thing, no one is going to ever care enough about you to live and execute your dreams. That's up to you. You have to do that. You have to build your dreams because no one's thinking about you enough to do it. So you have to build your dreams. You have to be the one that's willing to put the time in, put the grind in, do the hard work to live the life that you want. Heidi has been awarded so many awards. She's a luminary and a famous luminary. If you got a Wikipedia page, guys, you are famous and you are a luminary in the venture capital world. She also told me that she was in the same dorm as Tim Draper, so her and Tim go way back. I love this conversation so much, and I hope that we can have Heidi on again. Make sure that you check her out, Google her, or we're gonna have all the links. If you want more information on Heidi, make sure that you find your way over to vchunting.com/Heidi Roizen. Thanks again, guys. This has been a great interview, and I hope to see you guys soon. Peace out.